Hello there, Gamerinos and Gamerinas. Welcome to UnicornStorm. This is Rady, and today I'm talking about Master Detectives Archives Raincoat. Yeah, the game's title is quite a mouthful, but what do you expect from an anime game? There's even an arbitrary and not all that clever pun in it. Raincoat is a weird and flashy and stylish crime-solving detective adventure game made by Spike Chunsoft, the creators of the Danganronpa series, another weird and flashy and stylish crime-solving game series. And while not every game of theirs is as exaggerated as these examples, it still is kind of their calling card, their hallmark style. In this game, you are an apprentice detective called Cockhead and are sent to the company town of the Amaterasu Mega Corporation, a cesspool of a city drenched in rainwater and neon light, where crime and corruption run rampant and what little laws are actually there are enforced by company bloodhounds. Every day new corpses turn up, and the odds are always stacked against you, with your own life being on the line most of the time. So you get some much needed help from your little undead sidekick, a full-fledged Shinigami called Shinigami-chan because it's cuter, who loves nothing more than wallowing in all the death and despair around you and teasing or outright torturing you. And you don't just present your evidence to the police or a judge, but instead have to partake in a weirdly perverted abstraction of the investigative and deductive process in the form of giant, visually stunning mazes. Yeah, when it comes down to it, this game is pretty much just Danganronpa, just not a murder party, but a detective mystery. You still have to solve absurd murder cases in ridiculous fashion, riddled with courtroom debate battles and silly minigames.
She stabbed him with a knife.
But can you spell the word knife?
Raincoat features similar visual design from its characters and surroundings to its colorful effects, especially when it comes to blood and gore. And it also sports a similarly psychedelic yet exhilarating soundtrack composed of some kind of electro-funk and some synth jazz. It's some tasty jams is what I mean. Just listen to some of the tracks in comparison.
Right, Togo? Did you really go to the rec room?
Why would I have... Wait, but more important...
It's not just the presentation that's similar to Danganronpa though, it's the whole structure of pretty much everything. There's once again a very prominent deuteragonist who's a weird and insane and rather brash villain? For sure in the case of Danganronpa's Monokuma, a plump panda doll who seems to have no regard for decency or the value of life, whose pendant in Raincoat is Shinigami-chan, this plump little fluffy squishy ghost with no regard for decency or the value of life. But this game goes even further with the weirdness and gives the ghost a magical girl transformation scene whenever we step into a mystery maze, which in turn enhances, every action we need to take with sexual undertones and a batshit insane presentation. Instead of debates where everyone talks over one another and where we need to destroy lies and bad arguments with truth bullets, we now face off against those who try to bury the truth in one-on-one battles, dodging insults and false statements and attacking lies with a solution blade and the corresponding evidence. Where in Danganronpa the killer was creatively and brutally executed at the end of each debate, here our Shinigami sidekick reaps the soul of the killer at the end of a mystery maze, which causes the killer in the real world to die. Due to a heart attack, I guess. And in between cases we can explore our surroundings, find out more about the world we are living in and hang out with the main cast, growing closer and learning more about them. But where Danganronpa was tense and haunting or action-packed and frenetic, both in cutscenes as well as during the classroom trials, Raincoat comes off as more sluggish and clumsy. The problem is the fully animated 3D characters versus 2D illustrations in previous games. Those illustrations could look just how the designers wanted them to, even defying proportions or perspective. There was no animation, only hard cuts towards the next scene, so everything was just on point. Firing truth bullets happened instantly with just a flashy screen effect and a loud gun sound. In contrast, all those animations need to flow together and need enough of a wind up and a wind down. I mean, they don't need to have those. They could as well be choppy and highly stylized, but that's just the style the developers went with. Attacks now have actual traveling time and the player character has a hitbox, so attacking and dodging are now affected by collisions in 3D space. It's not bad and still fun, but not as stylish as in Danganronpa. Also, Punk's shooting lies with a gun is way cooler than a kid in a raincoat swinging a sword around. The writing for both plot and characters is, as expected from most modern anime games, overly exaggerated and tropey, and it doesn't always hit the mark or stay consistent, but it still is leagues better than this other anime detective murder core game I played recently. The actual murder cases quickly devolve into ludicrousness with all their absurd and unreasonable occurrences, but stay entertaining to the very end. Maybe even get more entertaining with all the ridiculousness. Similarly to the Ace Attorney games, it's less about seeing through the mysteries and figuring out the course of events early on and then present and argue your case based on your own reasoning and logic. Instead, you just follow along. Have a story told to you. Learn only about the specific facts and only find the clues the game wants to reveal to you at any moment. Even collect some obvious red herrings and follow up on them just because that's the flow of the story right now. Cases are riddled with twists and turns and sudden revelations, and the whole process is more about staying attentive and quickly switching gears when new developments arrive and a previously inconspicuous piece of evidence is suddenly needed to solve the mystery. Many times you're not even allowed to find certain clues yourself, you can't even interact with them, even though they're obviously needed to crack the case, because another character is supposed to reveal them to you later, for the sake of the story, or it is supposed to be a part of a later twist. Your progression through a case always looks as followed. You arrive at a crime scene and talk to the witnesses, investigate and look for clues, and jot all relevant things down in your notebook in form of solution keys that you need later during the maze section. You do this for quite a while, moving between different points of interest and having long-winded conversations in between to flesh out the world and the characters and slowly move the plot along. During this part of the case, there aren't too many puzzles. It's mostly just a matter of visiting every important location and interacting with every interactable object there. After a while, you have collected enough evidence to summon the mystery maze, and this is where you actually solve the case. Here, the game throws a bunch of obstacles in your way that you have to overcome with the correct evidence, that being solution keys, and by succeeding in sometimes inappropriate minigames. Sometimes the game simply asks you a question and you have to choose the correct answer. Sometimes you have to select the correct evidence in a QTE scene. Sometimes you have to spell a certain word corresponding to your evidence.
But can you spell the word knife?
But most of the time you have to battle perverted representations of the culprits or law enforcement and destroy them with facts and logic. The mazes are incredibly gimmicky and don't really function like labyrinths. They are actually just straight hallways connecting the minigames to each other and look sometimes bland in their weirdness and sometimes pretty amazing. But when all is said and done, the mazes are just the classroom trials with extra steps. There's no sense in walking through the infinite hallways. The action scenes and minigames don't really add that much to the overall experience, and to be honest, wouldn't be missed if they weren't there. I'd argue it would actually help with the pacing and make the game even better if you just instantly move from scene to scene. Keep all the weird stuff, just don't let me hold forward for a minute just to listen to a conversation. This isn't Dear Esther. Same as in Danganronpa, you never have access to all your evidence simultaneously. The game hands you always one correct piece of evidence as well as one or more red herrings in any debate scene. And there's always only one statement where you can correctly present your evidence. The game focuses more on throwing distractions in your way and having you dodge around constantly, so the whole nature of these debates discourages deductive reasoning. Whereas in Ace Attorney you always have access to all your pieces of evidence and need to find out for yourself which statement to press and where to present your evidence. Here there are only a handful of highlighted statements and only a small number of possible retorts. Most of the time it's rather obvious from the get-go what you need to do, and it's just a matter of waiting for the correct statement to appear. This was also the case in Danganronpa, and it's another thing Ace Attorney does better in my opinion. In Ace Attorney you get to read the whole testimony once before you're tasked with finding any inconsistencies. In this game you need to avoid attacks from the start and weigh up what evidence to use and when to use it before even knowing what the whole testimony entails. I mean, no one stops you from listening to it to the end once before attempting to present your evidence, though that kinda breaks the whole flow the game's going for. It still works, but it's a bit messy. And even though I think the action sequences don't really complement the evidence-based puzzle solving, there are some rather nifty moments where you have to carefully read the enemy's statement and you can feel quite clever at times. But mostly the game is more spectacle than actual puzzle solving. So it's not really a crime-solving fantasy. You're in for the ride, which is fine if the ride itself is entertaining, and for the most part, Spike Chunsoft is known to deliver in that regard. And this new game has a lot going for it, but there were still some missteps along the way. The game has been released exclusively on Nintendo Switch, but it runs like crap on that system. I mean, it works, but it's just poorly optimized, with a low and unstable frame rate, piss poor draw distance, at least when it comes to character models. The gorgeous vista of the city is being kept intact the whole time. But there are texture pop-ins and little graphical glitches all the time. And while the loading times aren't too long, loading screens appear constantly, even during cutscenes, without any change in scenery. When you're not in an active investigation, you can more or less freely explore the town, find a good number of lore and flavor texts, and stumble upon a bunch of side quests that don't really add that much to the game. Sure, we are a detective and it's our job to take on all kinds of smaller assignments, like finding missing persons, retrieving stolen goods and all that good stuff. Thing is, the gameplay in this game isn't deep or varied enough to support more complex side quests, so they end up rather bland. The game presents itself a bit like an RPG, but it really isn't. There's no combat in this game and no stats. Inside the mazes you have minigames and quick-time events, and outside of them you only have conversations. And no, there's no actual decision-making involved. Now, if the side quests had some brain teasers or maybe some Professor Layton-like puzzles, they would be alright. But as they are now, it mostly comes down to talking to the quest giver, walking to another spot or NPC, and talk some more before returning to the quest giver. Sometimes you have to talk to multiple NPCs, sometimes you have to remember a description, but since you can always review your chat log, even that really isn't a challenge. Well, I say you can always do that, but that's not true. During some puzzles or questions during the main investigation or inside the mazes, you are not allowed to review your evidence, which is just stupid. The game wants me to make informed decisions, but then it doesn't allow me to look up the information. Well, making mistakes doesn't get punished too harshly. But then again, what keeps me from just abusing this and trial and error my way through the cases? Just let me review my clues, goddammit. So, this is another overly stylish Spike Chunsoft crime visual novel hybrid with a meek and shy main character in a world full of caricatures. To be honest, I'm slowly growing tired of these writing tropes and would love to see some fresh new ideas. I love the style of these games, but these modern anime concepts begin to get stale. Or maybe they have been for a while now. If you like the Spike Chunsoft detective games, I'm sure you'll get a lot of fun out of this one. And if you didn't enjoy previous games, then this one won't suddenly be your thing. Raincoat has a lot going for it, and I do have a good time with it. The presentation is just fantastic, the stylized visuals at times amazing. And the writing, while not great, is still entertaining enough. I just hope that some of the tropes get dropped, at least for a while, in future games of that kind. And with that, I stop rambling on and wish you the greatest of days. That's it from Rady, and I hope to see you again on the next game.
やるべきことはいくつかあるが、まずは密室を先ほど手に入れた人形を